All right, we got Robert Whittaker knocking out Ikram Aliskerov in round one in the UFC's first event in Saudi Arabia. So, what really happened in this fight? Let's get into it. In the beginning of round one, we have Ikram. He's throwing his front kicks. These are a big weapon that he has in the stand-up. He didn't even go for any takedowns in this fight, so this fight is pretty much only in the stand-up. So, he throws a kick. 20 seconds into the fight, Robert Whittaker avoids it. Now we have Robert Whittaker stepping in and throwing a double jab, and it misses, but it gives Robert Whittaker a good idea of how Ikram Aliskerov is going to react whenever Robert Whittaker attacks. So you can notice that he's moving backwards, and he actually drops his left hand to try to almost just block with it, stick it out as a post as he's moving away. And you can also see his right hand is kind of by his chin, but not super up by his chin. So double jab from Robert Whittaker, and you get a good reaction from Ikram Aliskerov. Here we have another front kick from Ikram, kind of hits Robert Whittaker right on the chest. Actually, a pretty decent front kick. If the fight goes on longer, maybe those can start taking an effect. Here we have a good leg kick from Robert Whittaker, and it actually connects really cleanly. Robert Whittaker has good leg kicks, and Ikram Aliskerov doesn't have good leg kick defense. So again, if the fight ended up going longer, these leg kicks from Robert would have really started adding up. And then another just nice jab from Whittaker. And Whittaker has a really good style to get in on Aliskerov, because we know that Aliskerov's main defense is just sticking out his left hand, almost like he's jabbing his opponent. Whittaker has great head movement. He ducks underneath jabs, landing jabs of his own. Even though he has, I think, like 5 or 6 centimeters shorter in reach than Aliskerov, he's still able to consistently land jabs on Aliskerov, better than Aliskerov was able to land on him. Aliskerov lands a pretty good jab here, countering a leg kick from Robert Whittaker. You can see it's impacting Whittaker's head, and Aliskerov throws a follow-up right hand, but his foot placement is really stagnant. He doesn't move his feet that much, and you can see how much he's leaning to try to land this instead of actually moving his feet, and as a result, Robert Whittaker's head is out of the range of that punch. And this is a good time to talk about the odds since they flash them up on the screen. Robert Whittaker at minus 130 against a guy who has never beaten a ranked middleweight, I thought was a steal. When I was breaking down this fight, I said that Robert Whittaker would probably be at minus 200. That would have been what I would have rated him at. And yeah, at minus 138, that's pretty crazy, because Aliskerov has shown that even though he has 2 first-round knockouts in the UFC, his striking is still very rudimentary. Here we have just another jab from Robert, and this is an interesting little exchange because you can see that Aliskerov is moving his head away, but his left hand is completely down. So he really doesn't have any defense. He's not guarding his chin with his right hand. He's definitely not guarding his chin with his left hand, and he's just moving his head away to try to avoid the punch. Here we have Ikram throwing another body kick, again, right to the chest of Whittaker. Great kicks from Ikram. And this I just wanted to highlight because Whittaker does a pretty good feint that gets a big reaction out of Aliskerov. So let's just see what his reaction is. Whittaker steps in deep with his left foot as if he's going to throw a jab or this right hand. It's kind of up to Whittaker to whatever he does. And Ikram just does the same thing. Just throws out his left hand. He doesn't really shell up or move away. His feet, let's take a look at his feet. Are his feet actually stagnant? Yeah, pretty much. They pretty much are. I mean, he moves a little bit, and you can see he drops his hips, but his feet actually don't move at all. And he's just dropping his hips, throws out the jab to kind of put Whittaker, keep him in place. And now just over a minute into the fight, Ikram does a double jab. He pumps up a feint and then throws the jab. And it actually misses Whittaker, but still a pretty good attempt. Jab from Ikram, and this is what I'm talking about, how good Whittaker is at just ducking underneath these straight strikes. So he just ducks underneath the jab, lands a jab of his own, and gets a pretty good reaction out of Aliskerov, and then Aliskerov actually starts to retreat. We have a sequence here that is reminiscent of the finishing sequence, and this is actually a really cool little interaction. So you have Ikram Aliskerov is just trying to land a push kick on Robert Whittaker. Going to throw up that front kick, hit him in the chest, but let's see what happens. So at the same time, Whittaker's ready for it. As soon as he sees his knee starting to lift up to throw the kick, Whittaker is in the attack. So what happens? Whittaker is ready to throw this jab. This front kick is coming up, and you can see that it actually gets caught on Whittaker's leg. So he effectively checks the front kick while landing his own jab. So that was a really cool sequence from Whittaker there, where he's able to block his opponent's shot and counter it at the same time. And even though that jab barely landed on Aliskerov, it still served to stop any kind of forward momentum that Aliskerov had coming in, and it pushed him back off balance. Here we have Whittaker trying to counter another one of Aliskerov's kicks, but this time Aliskerov throws a leg kick, kind of hits up the thigh, not real much impact on that attack. Whittaker throws a jab, and Aliskerov is actually doing a pretty good job of evading Whittaker's jabs by sticking his hand out. Of course, when that hand isn't able to connect on Whittaker because Whittaker's ducking underneath it, then he's getting hit by the jabs. Whittaker throws a jab, Aliskerov avoids, and you can see here he doesn't even stick out his hand. He's just kind of has it down at his hips and when he's retreating. So this is a really bad habit that Aliskerov has developed. Just defensively, he is not sound at all. He's simply moving away from his opponents, but he doesn't even have quick enough feet to avoid these strikes, and he's not really defending his head with either of his arms. This is not a great defensive post because it's not by his chin. It's out like 6 inches in front of his face. And his other arm, I know that he likes to stick it out to try to keep his opponents back, but if he sometimes forgets to stick it out, then it's completely useless, and he doesn't have it up by his chin, so it's pretty much just doing nothing. And you can see that after the strike goes through, he tries to stick it out, maybe to either just keep Whittaker back or land a jab on him, but either way, when he really needed it, it was by his hip. And like maybe if you're 80 years old, you'd want to protect your hip with it, but as a 30-year-old MMA fighter in the UFC, this is not a good position for your arm. And we can see this really come back to bite Aliskerov. So this is 6 seconds later. Whittaker blitzes in. He has his left hand out. Immediately, what does Aliskerov do? He sticks out his hand. Why is he doing that? Well, he's sticking out his hand. What's going through his head? He doesn't even move his feet back at all. What's he trying to do? He's trying to throw a knee. And we can see this knee is actually getting through. But he's pulling his hand back. Look at his hand position. This is not the hand position that you'd want to see from an elite MMA fighter in the UFC. Both of his hands are out in front of him, but not even straight up to try to keep his opponents back. They're at his waist level. And he's throwing this knee. You can see that Whittaker actually changed up the strike from the jab to the right hand. And this proves to be pretty deadly. So we can see that Ikram is kind of just flailing his arms. There's not really too much thought behind this. He's not moving his feet back, and he's throwing this knee. I don't know whether it's to try to catch Whittaker on the chin or to just keep Whittaker off of him, and he's trying to almost do a knee shield to keep Whittaker off of him. But either way, Ikram is way too slow to defend himself against Robert Whittaker's blitzes. His hands are completely down. You can see this knee actually does connect, but even so, that right hand is just way too much money. And you can see how Whittaker has such a good angle to land this. His punch just goes on a perfect trajectory to land right below the ear on the neck with huge impact, wobbling him, definitely knocking off his equilibrium, possibly concussing him. And from there, Whittaker is able to finish it pretty quickly. And this is kind of reminiscent to a punch that we saw Aliskerov get hit with by Phil Hawes. So again, he goes for this kick. And it's great to have these little, let's call them fight ticks, where you have like your go-to strikes that you will use over and over again in the fight. But you need to be able to know when to use them, because this is not a good scenario in when to use it. You shouldn't use a push kick when your opponent is within the range of the kick. Use the push kick when you're actually going to push them, not when your opponent's coming in on you. Anyway, so Phil Hawes catches the kick. He actually kind of pulls Aliskerov, And at least in this situation, Aliskerov actually had his hands on Phil Hawes, but Phil Hawes still lands a nice right hand. And he doesn't have the angle that Robert Whittaker had on Aliskerov, but he still connects pretty cleanly, and that does kind of wobble Aliskerov in this position. And then let's just take a look at the finishing sequence that Robert Whittaker has. So he has him wobbled. He changes his angle again, lands a nice jab, pushing Aliskerov backwards towards the cage. And at this point, Aliskerov's defense is pretty much useless. Aliskerov is stumbling around. Robert Whittaker tries to go for a head kick, which misses. Then he goes for a jab, connects cleanly on the eyes, and then an uppercut, which is the finisher. A few more punches of ground and pound from there, but Aliskerov was done after that uppercut. So, Robert Whittaker proving once again that he is at the top of the middleweight division. We could keep seeing him fight these lower ranked middleweight guys, but I think he should fight, if not for the title, fight against someone for the title eliminator. I actually think Whittaker versus Strickland would be a great fight. They should make that fight in Perth. Strickland was a fan favorite in Perth last year when he fought against Adesanya. I think that Adesanya versus Duplessis in the main event, Whittaker versus Strickland in the co-main event would be sweet, because all of those guys have history against each other now. So whether it be Strickland versus Izzy or DDP, I think fans would be down for that. Or if it was Whittaker versus Strickland or DDP, fans would be down for that too. As for Ikram Aliskerov, he needs a lot of work. He has a great jab. He has a great right hand. But when he's not able to really support that with any other kind of technical aspects of his stand-up game, they do not stand up on their own. And he will continue to fail against guys who actually have good striking in the middleweight division. And just to explain myself a little bit more on that, you can have a good jab, you can have a good right hand, but if you don't have the foot movement, you don't have good defense, you don't really have the ability to check leg kicks or to avoid big punches from your opponents, you are really going to struggle. And Ikram, I know people always say the basics are what really can take you far in MMA, and the guys at the top of the divisions have mastered the basics. They've all mastered the basics. Justin Gaethje has a great jab, has a great right hook, he has good leg kicks, he has great leg kicks, but none of that's going to matter if you don't also shore up the rest of your game. And if you really only have a jab, right hand, and a push kick, but you don't have the defense, the footwork, or kind of any other strikes that you can put out there to make your opponents worry about your jab, cross, and push kick, then you're really going to struggle. So I think Aliskerov should try to start wrestling maybe. Again, it's going to be hard for him to continue having success on the feet. Set up your strikes with your wrestling, set up your wrestling with your strikes. He's really got to flesh out the rest of his game plan, because this position is not good. This is not a good look. When you have a guy like Robert Whittaker barreling down on you, and this is your first instinct for how to defend yourself, you're going to get knocked out 9 times out of 10. Anyway, guys, thanks for watching. Let me know what you thought of the fight. Let me know if you saw anything else that I missed in this breakdown. And do you think Robert Whittaker is going to be champion by this time next year? Let me know your thoughts in the comments down below. And everyone, have a great day.